Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our council meeting of March 1st, 2016. First, let me ask you to silence your devices and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mariko Sayak.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. As is our custom, we always have a young person from our community come up and help us with the Pledge of Allegiance, and tonight is no different. We have Benicia Juarez, and so if you could please come on up. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before she helps us out. Benicia is an 8th grader at Rolling Oaks School. Her school and our staff gave me a little bit of information on her, and she looked it over and she said it was accurate. And so she is an AVID, Advancement via Individual Determination, which is a college readiness class. She plays soccer. She reads, she likes to read. Her favorite subject is science. And so I said, so tell me something fun about you. So she thought a while and she goes, I'm friendly. So at this time, let's turn the mic over to her and please stand and join us for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Round of applause. She goes back to her seat. Let's give her another applause. At this point in our meeting and in the year, we have the State of the Town address. And first of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us, whether you're on the room or whether you are listening to us. When I was thinking about what I would be saying this evening, I considered, the things I've done in this community as a resident, on the Planning Commission, and on the council. And it has, for decades, been centered on development. Pro-growth, slow growth, no growth. And that's always been the issue with the residents, with the Planning Commission, with the council. So that is not going to be the issues that I will be discussing with you this year. You will get to hear me talk about infrastructure and finances and transportation, with one exception. Even though we are not focusing on development, one of the probably biggest developments in Los Gatos will be moving forward, the North 40. And for those of you who may not yet know, that is the property bordered by Lark Avenue, Los Gatos Boulevard, 17 and 85 in the north part of our town. I believe this project is coming forward, or application is coming forward to the Planning Commission this month, and in preparation for that meeting, the developer is starting to put in its story poles with the orange netting. I drove out there yesterday and I saw that the poles were at least somewhat up. They were up, and I hear tell that the whole orange netting story pole will be completed by, I believe, March 4th or March 5th. So those of you who have an interest in this project, after those story poles are up and the netting is up, you can drive out there and you can see the height and scope of the project for yourself. With regard to infrastructure, finances, and transportation, there's always a lot of issues, but what I decided to do is just focus on a couple within each subject area And specifically, what I'm trying to do with each one is bring forward issues that have not yet come to the council. In fact, a lot of the council members up here will not have information on some of these issues because they're just in the starting stages. Beginning with infrastructure, a downtown Los Gatos parking garage. And I figured if I started with that, maybe I'd get, some attention. See? The property we're talking about is located generally at the intersection of Santa Cruz Avenue and Main Street. Specifically, it is property, it's by Victory Lane, Main Street, and Linden, and St. Mary's High School. And that is property that is owned by the town of Los Gatos. We purchased that property with RDA funding, redevelopment funding, and so we are required to build 6 below market price units on that property. And so last year, there was a subcommittee of this council, and when I talk about a subcommittee, that means 2 of us, a subcommittee of this council that explored the construction of a parking garage in downtown Los Gatos. The requirements that we put on it in our subcommittee was that you had to build the 6 below market rate units, you had to have as much public parking as possible, and you had to comply with our ordinances when you're talking about setbacks, height, design. So we put that out, and we wanted to see if anybody came forward, any developer came forward with an interest in that kind of development. And we, two did. One, Barry Swenson, and the other, Presidio Development Partners. And they basically had the same concept, and these were very conceptual. They basically had the same concept, which was a multi-story parking garage with public parking, with the 6 below market rate units, with market rate unit condominiums, and with the potential for commercial development. And so our subcommittee has completed its work, and we are going to be bringing forward to the council, and we haven't done this yet, we're going to be bringing forward to the council a recommendation that they direct staff to go forward with negotiating a public-private development for the parking garage. And at this point, as far as I can remember, I don't think that that is yet calendared for the council. Having said that, most of these issues haven't yet come before the council. The next one on infrastructure has come before the council a lot, many times, for years, the Almond Grove repaving project. And what we did at our very last meeting is we approved the reconstruction of Bachman and Broadway in cement. We chose the company that is going to do that work. And as I understand it, they will begin their discussions with the neighbors and so forth this month. The construction itself should begin in May and hopefully be completed by the end of October. That is the plan. We also, at our last meeting, asked staff to come back to us in April with 3 companies that can do the designing in concrete. Thank you. That's why she's the vice mayor. In fact, I asked her before, I says, if they don't quiet down, your job as vice mayor is to make people quiet down. But we got through that one. To bring back 3 companies that will design the other 8 streets in concrete. And as I said, we're going to be getting that back in April. 3 issues that I want to discuss with you with regard to finances. And the first one is going to be a word that you've heard a lot. You've read it, you've heard it, you've seen it on the op-ed pages, and that is called unfunded liabilities. And to back it up a little bit, public employees have pensions, public employees have health benefits, and the concept was that those benefits would be funded by the state of California, by CalPERS. However, there was an assumption by the state that its funding would have a 7.5% return on investment, ROI. And when that doesn't happen, and when that didn't happen, then the shortfall has to be paid by the local government, by the town of Los Gatos. And what CalPERS does is they do a biannual assessment, evaluation about what the shortfall is, and the town has to pay that. We don't have to pay it all at one time. It's spread over 30 years. But when you spread it over 30 years, sort of like your mortgage, you're going to pay more than just the base rate. What the Finance Committee, again, two of us on the Finance Committee, has been evaluating over the last couple of months is, can we reduce the amount that we have to pay, either by making a lump sum payment or reducing the number of years that we make this that we do this payment. Right now, we are paying $4 million a year for our pension and $1.5 million annually for our health care benefits or other benefits. So within the near future, although I don't think it's calendared yet, we will be asking the council, the Finance Committee will be asking the council to consider a lump sum payment or a reduced number of years so that our total outlay will be reduced. However, in order to do that, we have to have the staff come back with a funding source, a potential funding source, and also we want them to report back to the council as a whole how much our total payout would be reduced if we take one of these or both of these avenues. The next financial thing is the Ad Hoc Committee on Tax Measures. Now, this is a process that I've never heard us using in this town. What we did is we established an Ad Hoc Committee on Tax Measures with 2 council people and 3 members which were selected from the community. Now, before I go into what it is they decided, let me give you the backstory. And the backstory is that Los Gatos, every community, has capital improvement projects that need to be financed. And by capital improvement projects, I'm talking about things like retaining walls, parks, trails, streets. And Los Gatos does not have a dedicated source of funds for our capital improvements. So what we do, and I told my husband I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible. What we do is in May, we do our budgets. The town does its budget. In doing its budget, what it does is it projects for the next fiscal year, which is July 1st through June 30th, what our income will be, and then we have our expenses budgeted against that projected income. What Los Gatos has done is, if at the end of that fiscal year, June 30th, our expenses turn out to be less than the amount of money we've budgeted, we take that delta and we use it for our capital improvement projects. You can probably see the issue here is uncertainty. Because we are such a fiscally conservative town, we generally do have funds available at the end of the year for our capital improvement projects. But you don't know for sure that you will, and you definitely don't know what that amount will be. And so what the Ad Hoc Committee on Tax Measures was doing is seeing if there is some kind of a taxing process that we can use to fund our capital improvement projects. One that they were looking at was to increase our transit occupancy tax, or TOT, which is the amount that visitors pay as a tax when they stay in our motels or our hotels. So that was one thing that they were going to examine and see if they would recommend to the council whether or not that should be put on the ballot. The other one is called we wanted him to consider was the Utility Users Tax, UUT, which was a tax on individuals who are associated with could be lots of things, their gas, their electric, their cable, any kind of those utilities. That committee also just completed its work, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago. And I actually haven't seen the minutes. And so I'm sort of like going out on a limb here, but what I understand their recommendation is that they say, go ahead and go forward with the TOT, the Transit Occupancy Tax. However, they are recommending that we do a survey of our taxpayers to see what whether or not they want to go forward with the UUT, and also whether or not they want to have a sales tax increase. I believe that issue will be coming back before the council, that recommendation on March 15th. And I want you to put that sales tax thought in the back of your mind, because we're going to be swinging back around to that concept later in this State of the Town address. The other financing issue that the council has been considering is the sale, lease, or reuse of town properties. Now, one of those properties is the property on Main and Santa Cruz, which I've already talked to you about with regard to the parking garage. The other one is, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other pieces of property. One of them is the venue, and that's the building on the high school property. And that one, right now, the town is in negotiations with the KCAT to see if they want to lease that property. So those negotiations are in process. The other properties, one is on Winchester. It's right on the corner of Winchester and Lark. Another one is Ditto's Lane, which is off of Main Street, down the hill there. Another one is the former Tate Museum, the property on Tate, which is no longer being used for the art museum. And the other one is Forbes Mill, which is no longer being used for the history museum. With regard to these properties, we have not yet brought them back to the council for a public hearing. That I think we will be doing soon. But just by way of background, because we are a government entity, should we decide we want to move forward with the sale of any of these properties, we have to first declare them as surplus properties, and then we have to go through a statutory process to allow certain public entities to buy them first before we can go beyond that to a private sale. And that's Barbara's really short explanation of something that could be very complicated. Transportation. I happen to think that transportation and its associated funding and taxes is probably our biggest issue this year. I'm going to start on a local and therefore smaller venue, which is the town within the past, town council within its last 2 meetings has approved a traffic study for the areas, for the traffic and parking around our schools. Traffic and parking around our schools is one of our biggest issues. And so we will have a study that has just begun, I think, this month, study being done to assess how can we improve traffic and parking in the school areas, all the school areas. And I want to give a call out to our elementary school, our schools, our Hillbrook School, our high school, for joining with the town in funding this study. And similar to that, in my time here on the council, what has happened, and it's really happening a lot now, is that our relationship and our partnership with the school districts has increased amazingly. And I want to, because I see school people out here, and so I want to thank you all, because I think it's a very important partnership. We may have different legal jurisdictions, but we have a common interest in our community. So thank you all, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. The other study that is just beginning, I think this month, is we've received funding for a throughout the town bicycle pedestrian master plan, and that is just beginning. Now we're going to leave being within Los Gatos and transportation and move out to Highway 85. Let's begin with Highway 85. Within the last year or two, VTA Caltrans has moved forward with a plan to do several things with 85. One is to eliminate the median area, to eliminate the HOV lanes, and to construct pay lanes on 85. And that was from South County to 280, 85, all along that way. The decision was made by those entities that this project would not have an environmental impact, and so they did not do an environmental impact report. They instead did a negative declaration. However, the city of Cupertino, the city of Saratoga, and the town of Los Gatos thinks that this project and its scope can very definitely have environmental impact, and so have filed a CEQA suit against the VTA and the Caltrans, asking the court to order an EIR, and that litigation is ongoing. I should say as a side note that when 85 was first built, they entered into a contract with the town of Los Gatos, saying that the median lane cannot be eliminated unless it's going to be used for light rail. That contract still exists, and it's in our back pocket, but we have not gone forward with it yet. Now, I told you to remember tax measures because we're going to swing back to that. In the last, I would say 3 years, I think the concept started in 2013, VTA has been considering a tax measure to place on the this November 2016 ballot for a 1/2 cent tax increase. There was a report that was circulated, however, this past year that said that the other tax measures, the transportation measures placed on by VTA, there were 2 prior to this, that most of the money went to BART and BART to San Jose. In fact, there were some who said that that was 80% of the prior 2 sales tax measures went to BART and the city of San Jose. Because of that, within the past year, the mayors of the North County area and the West Valley area, the mayors and managers have been having meetings probably over the last year and a half with the objective of coming up with an allocation that would spread the money around the county as opposed to not only having it focused on BART and BART to San Jose. By the time I became mayor in November, my first meeting with this North County West Valley Mayor-Manager Group was in December. And when I got there, there had been a lot of work done, and I was just handed by the other managers and mayors this allocation. And what they had done is they had already worked out, here's the allocation. This is what we want going to BART. This is what we want going to Caltrain. And so they had a list of allocations that ended up with the $6 billion, which they anticipated getting out of the sales tax measure in its 30-year life. There was a request that the mayors take this allocation back to our council. I did. And on February 2nd of this year, we had a study session when we discussed traffic and tax measures generally. And then as an agenda item, we actually weighed in on the allocation. And this council unanimously decided it was not going to support the allocation at this time. They directed the town manager and the town mayor to work on this allocation more and to consider the goals and objectives of Los Gatos when the manager and mayor work on this. And that's exactly what we intend to do. I should say, when you look at that allocation, some of the things on the $6 billion are general, like eliminate potholes, fix expressways. But there are some that are very specific, for example, to BART to San Jose. Another one is Caltrain in Palo Alto. And so I'm only one person on this council. I'm only one half of the mayor-manager duo here, but I am going to be looking to the allocation for something that specifically benefits our town, in addition to the general benefit that our commuters get when they have better expressways and freeways. As I prepared tonight's State of the Town address, I was thinking, I sort of felt like Dorothy and Wizard of Oz, traffic and budget and finance, oh my, that I'd be lucky if I'd got this far and you were still sitting in your seats and paying attention to me, and voila, you are. Are we going to do anything fun in Los Gatos this year? Yes, we are. Over the past year, all of our community concert contracts have expired. And so in February, we entered into a new contract for Music in the Park for our Sunday series with an organization appropriately called Los Gatos Music in the Park. Jazz in the Plaza will continue on under a new contract with Los Gatos Music and Arts. And our farmers market will continue on with a new organization called California Farmers Market Association. In addition to that, there are things that I consider fun for the council, fun for me. What I really enjoy for the council is our small business big applause, where once a month we bring forward a business that's been in our town, operated in our town for 25, 35, 45 years, and they do their work competently and quietly and under the radar, and so we're able to bring them forward at our meeting, give them a council commendation, and give them applause for all they do for our town. And I really enjoy that part of my work up here. The other part that I enjoy is once a month, as mayor, I get to go out and meet with the business. And again, I try and select businesses that we may not have seen or heard of. They could be on the second floor of one of our downtown two-story buildings, or they could be somewhere off of Blossom Hill Road or tucked away in the business parks on off of Lark Avenue. And they always have questions for me and for the town manager about Los Gatos, and I always have questions for them, mainly what made you come here, how do you like it, what could we do? And the answer is, we love it here, it's beautiful, we get to walk, we have the trail, we have restaurants, and why don't you have a parking garage? And that was at our very last meeting. And so as we move forward into 2016, I've gone over some of what I consider the bigger issues, some of the issues that have not even come before us yet. As a practical matter, this council makes hundreds of decisions, and those decisions have conflicting facts, they have competing interests, and it's sometimes frustrating, I know, to the people in the audience and to the council that our decisions are made not in a sprint, but in a relay race. Having said that, all of those decisions, all of these council people, all of our staff, make the decision with appreciation for how special our town is. And it's not just special because, we're located at the foot of the Santa Cruz Mountains with a creek running through it. But if you look back at our history in the 1800s, at that time when this town was formed, we were physically removed from other centers of population, and so we developed Los Gatos with residents, with businesses, and with industry. And we have worked since that time to maintain a well-balanced community. And so, as we go forward this year, we are mindful of the fact that we are part of a county, a region, a state, a world, and while our challenges may not be unique to us, our solutions can be. And so as we go forward in 2016, I look forward to working with you, with the council, with the staff to create Los Gatos unique solutions for our very special town. And thank you. We will now have a 5-minute break in case you're not all here for the rest of the agenda. Thank you all. I like the exuberance. But I'm going to call this meeting back to order, or at least try. May we have all the council people up at the dais. Mr. Rennie. Back to our agenda, our regular agenda. We have the council town manager reports, beginning with the council. Ms. Jensen. I was waiting for it to get a little more quiet.
Just talk loud. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since our last council meeting, I attended, apropos to the mayor's remarks, the Route 85 Policy Advisory Committee, and that is a body that came out of those mayor's meetings that Mayor Spector was talking about, where we meet with VTA and other mayors or other members of councils in the North and West Valley area to discuss actually items specific to Route 85. And this past meeting, we talked about various goals. We started to look at particular projects that we might consider recommending, I should say. But more importantly, we talked about the criteria that we would like to see for those kinds of projects. Did they achieve first and last mile? Did they achieve greenhouse gas reductions? Did they achieve transportation options for people in the West and North counties? So we are continuing to discuss that. We meet every month, and that is what we discussed this past month.
Thank you. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Yesterday, I attended the San Jose Water Company Drought and Water Update, and I'll just give you a quick few facts. Since last April, they achieved 32% reduction compared to the 30% asked for by the State Water Board. At this point, all California reservoirs are still below their average for this time of year, so in their map, a good part of California is still in extreme drought. Even though we feel like we've been getting rain, our reservoirs are still low, with the exception of only Folsom was at average. On April 1st will be their snowpack measurement, so at that time they will be deciding whether they're going to change restrictions or not. As some may know, the State Water Board has extended the restrictions until October of next year, and possibly those could be modified on how they measure snowpack on April 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Since the last meeting, and I guess apropos to the state of the town, the Finance Committee completed its work and will be recommending consideration to the council of lump sum or increased payments to reduce unfunded obligations. There was a meeting of the West Valley Mayor Managers, and we discussed various issues, but the lead issue was funding or unfunded obligations. There was a meeting with the representatives of the staff, and I met with representatives of the high school to discuss traffic issues and the high school development plans. And then, last night, there was a meeting of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, meeting with North County, West Valley mayors to discuss the tax measure. Ms. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. 3 items to report. First, the policy committee did meet. We discussed a recommended policy for formula retail that will be coming back at the next meeting, as well as a process for public facilities and the public usage of that. Just want to remind people that the council as a whole did make a decision on outdoor seating, and we discussed that at length at the policy committee, and just wanted to remind those restaurateurs that want to take advantage of this nice weather that there is an approved outdoor policy meeting, and to contact staff manager for that information. This ad hoc citizens committee, as discussed during the state of the town, we did meet twice, and I did attend the Los Gatos Union School District strategic planning session.
Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Since our last regular meeting, I attended the ad hoc citizens committee meeting 2 times, as stated by the Vice Mayor, as well as the Finance Committee, as stated by the Mayor, 1 time.
All right. town manager report.
There's no report tonight.
At this point in our agenda, we have consent items. These are items which will be acted upon in one motion unless somebody from the council or somebody from the community pulls an item from the consent calendar. That consent calendar currently consists of items 1 through 8. Does anybody from the council wish to remove a matter from the consent calendar? Mr. Rennie.
I'd like to pull number 7, policy for commission appointments.
Thank you, and we will be hearing that in its regular order. Does anybody from the audience wish to pull a matter from the consent calendar? All right, I see someone. Just give them a card, and I need to know which one it is that you're pulling.
I assume it's on the consent calendar. It's the Almond Grove matter. No, that's not on consent calendar.
We have nothing on the Almond Grove.
In terms of, okay, then I apologize. I thought from last.
Okay, no. Now, back to the people in the community. Anybody want to remove an item from the consent calendar? I only have one so far, and that's from council. Number 7. Seeing no one coming forward, may I have a motion? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I move to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item 7.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar exclusive of 7. Discussion, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. We will now go to agenda item 7. Agenda item 7 is to approve staff recommendations to amend Council Policy Manual 211 and entitled Commission Appointments. The way we will do this, since it has been pulled from a consent calendar, I will ask Mr. Rennie, who pulled the item, to briefly tell us why. We will then go to staff report, staff questions, and it will proceed just as with any other public hearing. Mr. Rennie?
So just briefly, one of the purposes for amending this policy was to help deal with some of the issues we had with residents that applied for more than one commission, and I believe that the red lines in section 3D actually make it worse, not better, unless we add some other words to it.
All right, I know I suggested that we keep this brief, but I'm going to go to attachment 1, red line. I'm going to try and get myself to your 3D. All right, hopefully everybody is caught up, or I've caught up with everybody else. I'm looking at the red line of 3D, and just to read the red line portion, once appointed to a commission by the town council, the applicant will not be eligible to be appointed for any other commission. Mr. Rennie, and what is the issue there, please?
Okay, so a little less briefly. So often we have residents that apply for more than one commission, and I, as a council member, sit and think, okay, well, here's an applicant that is very good for both of the commissions that they've applied to. And we normally do them in order of alphabet instead of, say, order of the ones with the highest demand or the ones that are most difficult to get on. So my concern is if, and what happened last time is we voted for one commission and somebody got appointed, and then they came to a more, and in this case came to the Planning Commission, which is a more difficult one to get on. That person had already been appointed to one, and so I, as my preference, would have liked to appoint them to the Planning Commission, but they'd already been voted onto another commission. We didn't have this in there, so we went back and we revoted, and it ended up that candidate got appointed to the Planning Commission. But my concern is the ability for me to figure out, okay, what's my first choice, and if they don't get it, then can we vote for them on the second choice? If we put this in here, now I might say, well, I think I prefer them for a later commission and won't vote for them for the one that is called for earlier. Would you like more explanation, or maybe I can stop there for now?
That's good. Staff report.
I'll be brief. This report came out of my office based on the observations I've made the last 2 years. The 2 changes I made, the first one I don't believe is being brought up, but that was to clarify the process and make sure that when we do the hand vote, the hands are raised and kept raised until the clerk will now announce what the votes are to make sure there's no issues or problems with the voting requirements, because there's been some issues with that. And then the other one is this issue of once you're been appointed to one, we really shouldn't be going back and rescinding our previous vote to re-vote for someone new. I understand Commissioner Rennie's issues with dealing with, the way we do it is alphabetical. My suggestion that if that's the council's wishes is we could certainly put in the policy the list of the commissions or boards and how they wished the voting to go and rank them that way. And that could be a possible suggestion on how to alleviate that by putting, like you said, Planning Commission seems to be the most difficult or important. It has its own decision-making ability, and then you could rank them that way, and then you'd be able to stick with that order if that's a solution to the issue, or I'm open to any other solutions in order that we don't have that issue come up again.
Questions of staff? Seeing none, as I said, this will now proceed as a regular hearing. Does anybody wish to address us on Agenda Item 7 regarding the Council Policy Manual 211? I do see someone coming forward.
Hi, Maria Risto, 85 Broadway. I almost pulled this item for the exact same reason that Councilmember Rennie did. So thank you for doing that, because I had the same thought. And in past years, we have had people apply to multiple commissions. I would not want, when I applied to transportation and parking, I would not have liked to have thought that if I were applying to more than one commission, I wouldn't have been able to give the council my preference. I may be quite flexible and want a couple, but sometimes somebody wants to get on a planning commission or another commission, and there's 3 times more people applying for a specific commission than there is for another. And maybe I would also like to do senior services, but I would first like a shot at the more difficult one. So this might be hard to codify, but I really do think it needs to be flexible each year, where the mayor or the manager can take into account, okay, we've got 3 people that have applied to more than one commission. Which one should we vote on first? Or ask the applicant what is their first choice, because I don't think it would be fair to an applicant to appoint them to a commission when they'd prefer to be on another one if they could get on there. I also don't think it would serve the town the best for someone to have the perception that they should really only apply to one, because they might get appointed to their second choice and have no recourse. So I think then you would lose applicants and the richness of having people applying to multiple commissions when it makes sense.
Thank you. Let me, since you're up there, I can use you as my litmus test. If, let's say, you apply for 2 commissions, and you have a first choice and a second choice, and then somebody else applies for commissions, but they also have a first, second, and third choice, but it's different from your first, second choice. Do you have any input on how we could organize the voting when we have all of these variables that may not be linear?
Correct. The combinations and permutations can get huge. Certainly, I would say Planning Commission has to go first. That should be the first commission you would vote on. It does have decision-making. It's videotaped. It's clearly, hierarchically, the most important commission. I don't know how you order the others. I would imagine that the next commission should be the ones that have an excessive number of candidates applying. And then you can trickle down where maybe it's the 2 incumbents, or you've got less applicants than you've got positions open, and that would vary each time. That's what I would do.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else want to address us on this agenda item? Seeing no one coming forward, we'll close the public testimony and return to the council for motion, discussion, questions. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a comment, and then it's going to be followed by a motion. I agree with Councilman Rennie and Ms. Ristow. We want to encourage participation in the town, and there are people that want to apply to commissions, or they just want to get involved in the town, and they may not know what they want to do, but they want to apply for a number of things. By keeping this policy the way it is and saying you're on or you're off, we don't provide the opportunity for both the residents and for the council to fully vet who is interested. So I think it does a disservice to both. And I don't know necessarily, the only reason that we would make it a hierarchy is if we retain the language that said, you're voted on and that's the end. If we have always voted and just let it go, and then we see where we are, so that qualified candidates may be on one or another commission. And at least in my experience in doing the interviewing from a council perspective, we more often than not ask a person who's applied to multiple commissions, what is it that you're really interested in? Or they will say based on the resume or whatever it might be. So I wouldn't want to foreclose that. So that's my comment. And my motion is to return this to the policy committee, which naturally should be considering policies in the town. So that is my motion.
Is there a second? Mr. Leonardis.
I will second that motion because I like the idea of returning it to the policy committee. I would like to add the comment that I don't view any commission or anyone's volunteer service worth more or worth less than any other commission. We appreciate all of your service and all of your volunteerism. So please come forward and please volunteer and serve your town on any board and commission that you would like to serve on. Where I am curious, a thought bubble popped up in my head as Ms. Jensen was speaking, and that is I would sure not like to see everybody apply for every commission and think that if they apply for every one, that they will inevitably be appointed to something. That's I guess the flip side of the coin if we try to establish a hierarchy. So I was kind of comfortable with the language that was proposed by staff, but I do like the idea of sending it back to the policy committee for further vetting.
Further discussion? I'm going to support the motion. Well, let me first ask a question of staff. Is this recommendation something that staff needs decided before we do our next set of interviews? Which is soon.
No. We will implement it, though, without the policy being in with the hand count and all of that. If we come across the same situation that we did last time, you would have to rescind your votes to revote for someone else like we did last time. So as far as the hand vote, you'll actually see it implemented where we're going to require you to keep your hands up and do the vote each time and announce that, even without this policy in action. The issue that's come up that we'll send to the policy committee, though, will be reviewed if it came up again as it currently is done.
All right, thank you. I'm going to support the motion because I don't object to this going to the policy committee to be vetted. I don't necessarily favor prioritizing the commissions by which is the most important, and so therefore put that one first. I might think the Planning Commission is most important, and I'm sure there are a lot of people in our community, especially now, who think that the Transportation Committee is the most important. So that when it goes to the Policy Committee, I just want to weigh in on a concern about prioritizing based upon what is most important. And then the other issue is the one I raised with the speaker, which is if you're looking for guidance from the applicants and applicants who apply to more than one commission, it's not going to be a linear analysis. It's going to be a not linear analysis, and so I would ask the policy committee to consider that also. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We are now at verbal communications. Anyone wishing to address us on a matter not on the agenda can come forward now. Please submit a card. I do have one card for verbal communications, John Shepherdson. You will have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Spector, and congratulations on your mayorship and the council for serving again this year. So, yes. So if we could flip to the next. Okay, So this is just a picture of these pedestrian signs. I congratulate the council for these signs. I think it's makes the town a lot safer for our visitors, our children, our adults. So kudos to you and staff. And that's just reiterating just what I said. Also, these murals on the utility boxes, I think it's wonderful. It looks beautiful. So thank you. This is a charge point charger. It's a level 3 charger, and it charges these electric vehicles much faster than the level 2 chargers. And so I suggest that perhaps we consider these in town. I'm told that they are like, in 20 minutes you get 80% of your charge. And that's what I'm talking about there. And then community choice for energy. I just had a question. What's our goal for going 100% renewable? I know Marin was at 62% in 2014. San Jose wants to be at 100%, I believe, by 2022. Now, this is a controversial issue, but do we reform the police budget or do we raise taxes? What about community choice on this option? Los Gatos budget, 15 million, Saratoga 5, Cupertino 10. They're about double our population. I feel, my opinion, the town's hurting because we're now considering taxes. We have no money for the garages. We don't have the money for a quality senior center. 20% of our streets are in poor or very poor condition. Employment liability is 39 million. I heard it before, it was more like 54 with the health and employment. I'm not sure. I guess we have to charge the Los Gatos Recreation Department to rent our buildings, and that's $250,000. And I guess some municipalities actually subsidize their rec departments, and we charge our Los Gatos Rec Department. So I think a third-party review is necessary from management partners. Police shifts. I think that our police officers work too long of shifts. They're 12-hour shifts. I think that they should be shorter. And the town, I would like to, Mayor Spector, I've seen in one of the magazines, Los Gatos is the gem of Silicon Valley. So playing on that, maybe we can make the downtown sparkle by just doing more to make sure that our sidewalks and our streets are clean. I think that benefits the downtown merchants, the landowners are certainly going to appreciate it, and the tourists, as well as the citizens. And I want to thank... Well, I don't have time, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other cards for verbal communications. Oh, or maybe you have a question. Mr. Leonardis.
Well, thank you, Mayor Spector. And maybe it's a question for staff. I wanted to find out about one of the points Mr. Shepperson raised regarding the charging stations. I know we put our charging stations in about 5 years ago, and it appears that there might be something superior or that something that will charge faster available out there now. Could that be incorporated into our current infrastructure in town?
Thank you, Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. We did just install a second set of chargers this last year that went in level 2 chargers in multiple locations throughout the town. The level 3 chargers are a potential and something that we'd love to put in. The challenge with level 3 chargers is they run at 480 volts, so it's a lot higher level of power, which requires an infrastructure investment in order to make those work. The charging stations themselves are about $70,000. There's grants out there to reduce that cost, but it's the infrastructure that really becomes a barrier to the installation. The infrastructure needs to be in place from a PG&E perspective, and then we need to be able to do the install of it, which is a cost effect. So certainly something that we want to look forward to in the near future for the town.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Any other questions? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. It's really a question for Director Morley also. To Mr. Shepperton's point about making the downtown sparkle, I know we've been doing some things. We've changed our contract for how often we're cleaning, I think. We're cleaning the top of the trash cans. I think you're buying more trash cans. Are we already seeing the results of that, or is it still to come? Where are we in this process?
I think you'll see that we'll continue to work on that and continue to make downtown even more beautiful. We did increase the number of recycling cans that are alongside the trash cans over the last year. We did the murals, as you saw the picture. We increased, at council's direction, we increased the amount of steam cleaning that we're doing on the sidewalks over the last year, so that's getting more attention that way. And we are indeed, one of the big gripes in downtown was the tops of the trash cans and how they got grimy and dirty, and we are indeed cleaning those now where that hasn't been something that was done by contract previously.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you both. Anybody else on verbal communications? Having no cards, seeing no one coming forward, we'll close that portion of our agenda. And now we will go to other business. Agenda item 9, fiscal year 2015-16 mid-year budget performance and status report for the 6 months ending December 31st, 2015. Staff report.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council members. Gita Ungvari, Administrative Analyst, Finance Department. It is my pleasure to present to you this evening with the Finance Director the fiscal year 15-16 mid-year budget performance report. The purpose of the fiscal year 2015 mid-year update is to report to Council on how the town actual revenues and expenditures are trending against its adopted budget. In addition, this is the time when staff request adjustments to update the adopted budget revenue and expenditures, items that were not forecasted or were unknown at the time of developing the fiscal year proposed budget. We are happy to report that, as illustrated in the town recently completed independent financial audit, the town has strong fiscal internal controls in place, the town uses prudent financial budgeting, and the town is fiscally sound. For fiscal year 2015-16, staff request 1.7 million general fund revenue adjustments. Current forecast indicates substantial increase in economically sensitive revenues, reflecting the recovering local economy. However, sales tax revenues are declining due to the continued impact from Netflix business model change. Significant items are listed on the slide. Details of all the requested adjustment can be found on page 12 to 16 of the budget performance report. For fiscal year 2015-16, staff request $700,000 general fund expenditure adjustment. Significant items are listed on the slide, and details of the requested adjustment can be found on the same area, page 12-16 of the budget performance report. If all the requested revenue and expenditure adjustments are approved, staff anticipates 1 million general fund surplus at the end of the current fiscal year. Now I'm turning over the presentation to Finance Director Steve Conway.
Thank you, Gita. Mayor Spector, members of council, thank you. I'm Steve Conway, Finance Director. Included with your report this evening on the mid-year is a request to start a pilot Hire Ahead program townwide. The purpose of this pilot program is to streamline our service delivery, and with the goal for that program is that we can eliminate some of the service disruptions we've had from having vacancies. An example would be, and I'll just use an example, if we had a building inspector position that we had a known retirement occurring in 3 months from now. The employee has let the town know they would be moving into retirement. We would have a funding mechanism available to start a recruitment process and a hiring process to get a replacement building inspector into the position so that they could start training, have some cross-training capability, and then move right into as soon as the retirement takes place, we would then be able to phase that person into the full-time service, and so we wouldn't have this disruption. This pilot program was in a response to service level gaps that were occurring when we have someone leaves the town for another opportunity or retirements or that sort of thing. We generally have had a number of month gap where we've had service disruptions that have occurred because we have not had the new person in place. So there is money available in the budget this year for such a program, and if it's successful, we will likely recommend a similar program for next fiscal year as part of the May budget that we'll be bringing forward to council. Looking at the outlook staff just completed our 5-year financial forecast. We'll do one more update of that for the budget, but the recent forecast we've just highlighted so we could save your eyes. This is the last line of our forecast, which can be found on page 6 of your council staff report. But the bottom line, and I like to talk about the bottom line and get to head mention, we are estimating approximate $1.1 or $1 million surplus this year if all goes according to plan. And you can see that there are also forecasted revenue above expenditures out for the future 5 years through 2021. We have used conservative revenue estimates for those forecasts. We have used conservative budgeting forecasts for our expenditure side. We have adjusted the expenditures for what we assume will be the PERS increases that we've talked about for our pension. Those have been built in. And we have one caveat is that we have incorporated in our expenditure side the assumed the benefits and salaries that are in the current bargaining agreements we have with our 3 bargaining units. We have just incorporated that level of salary and benefit. So tonight, staff will be recommending that you receive the fiscal year 15-16 mid-year budget performance and status report, including our 15-16 year-end projections. Council to consider authorizing recommended budget adjustments as outlined in the second quarter budget performance report, approve the townwide hired ahead authority pilot program, receive the town's 5-year financial projection for fiscal year 16-17 through fiscal year 2021. If there are any follow-up questions regarding our mid-year update or our mid-year staff report or any of the budget adjustments that we've requested this evening, staff from all the applicable departments are here in the council chambers tonight, and they are available to council for more in-depth discussion should council have those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. I have a question for you.
Okay.
And you and I discussed this at the Finance Committee meeting, so if we're going to a bigger audience now. You have, I think almost every year in the last few years, referenced the Netflix change of model as a reason for the sales tax going down, sales tax revenue. And the model that I was thinking of is when they changed from the DVDs to the streaming. And that happened some years back. And so could you explain for all of us what it is about the model at this time, which is several years post DVD, that is still impacting our sales tax revenue?
Thank you, Mayor. I would be happy to do that. So when Netflix changed their business model, prior to the change in business model, the primary package included, and I am a Netflix subscriber, just throwing that in there. And prior to the change in the business model, if you were a subscriber, your package came with a DVD that you could get in the mail, and when Netflix first introduced the streaming product, you had your option of using your DVDs, or you could stream your picture. And so that That simple fact, because there was a DVD that was part of your subscription, made the monthly amount that you paid subject to sales tax, our local sales tax. So the high water mark was when nearly all of Netflix subscribers had this plan, which incorporated a streaming plus a DVD, that made their monthly membership taxable. So the high water mark for the town was approximately $4 million worth of revenue to the town for all of the California subscribers. So that was they contributed significantly to our sales tax collections. With the change in the business model, Netflix offered not only the old plan, and which still is available, where you can get streaming and a DVD, the bulk of their subscribers were offered a plan that was a lesser price that was streaming only. Under the federal law, internet, if you just stream a movie or stream the product, it is not subject to, we have an internet exemption for sales tax. So if you are a streaming member only, the sales tax is not collected for that membership. So that went from whatever the amount was up to $4 million for us statewide to zero if you went to streaming. When we met with Netflix, they told the town, we expect that you will lose about 8% of our subscribers will move from getting a hard DVD and streaming to a streaming only product. We have just experienced, when we talk about the change in business model, we are losing more people are just moving to streaming only. I think the big factor in that is that the streaming speeds have and reliability of the streaming options have increased. So more people have said, I really don't need the physical DVD, so they're moving to the streaming package. We expect over time that right now the Netflix revenue statewide for us is about $1 million, and it's been tailing off, and the reason we have a budget adjustment tonight is tailing off faster than we anticipated. And it will continue to decline.
Thank you. Other questions, Mr. Rennie?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Could you put back up the 5-year forecast? So these are the numbers that ends up going into our capital improvement program. So I can see over the next couple of years, the numbers getting kind of small, only 700,000, 900,000. They're smaller than in the past. Typically, I think we've tried to underestimate so we get more like $1.5 million or better. My question really is more about upsides to this. Is there any hope? I know that you're very conservative, so you probably haven't included a lot of upsides. I know that the governor's asking the legislature to come up with road transportation fixing dollars that may have some significant impact to Los Gatos. Can you talk a little bit about upsides here?
Thank you, Councilmember Rennie. The upside here is that on the expenditure side, we assume for our expenditures that if we have a projected general fund budget, we're going to be spending that entire budget. So the cushion there is that typically we manage our budget very closely, so we would expect that we would underspend our approved budget. We typically do every year. We typically don't spend every dollar in every department that's budgeted, and that's a good practice, and we usually have savings. So that would likely be an increase. On the revenue side of things, we tend to be conservative. I think we didn't specifically call this out, but for this year, for instance, we thought we were being fairly optimistic, and we budgeted an 8 or 4% growth in our property tax. The latest information we have for this fiscal year from the county is double that. It's 8%. But back in May, we were hearing rumors of increases in interest rates. People a little worried about the real estate market, a little concerned that the rates will start to climb, and that tends to deflate the housing prices. So we tend to be a little conservative on our revenues. We tend to err to the conservative side. So I would expect that potentially we have some conservative estimates there, so that would also add to these balances if we were a little on the conservative side. On the expenditure side, where we have some things that we have to be aware of, is we do have bargaining units and demands for labor and that sort of thing in the future. And we have unknown costs, and we have the PERS issue, as the mayor pointed out, that we're trying to, we may be accelerating some payments in that regard to pay the unfunded liability down. That would take away from these balances.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Jensen?
Changed my mind. I'm going to hold my question for a different meeting.
Oh, okay. Other questions for Mr. Conway? Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Conway, being that this Netflix sales tax revenue has been decreasing, is there any other way for us to perhaps rearrange the structure of, how can I say it, some kind of vehicle to get more revenue out of Netflix?
Thank you, Councilmember Leonardis. We actually can point to one thing that we have done. Staff negotiated with Netflix last, I believe it was 2 years. It was 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, anyway. We formerly had them because of the DVD that came in your mailbox. We were classified them as a retailer under our business license. We now have, and Netflix has agreed to this, that their primary business now is internet commerce, which means that we have taken their business license taxes from formerly
From $1,000 to $200,000 per year.
Yes, that simple change in our interpretation of their primary business increased our revenue by a substantial amount. And as the worldwide revenue for Netflix increases, the business license, our business license ordinance taxes on worldwide revenue. So as the more countries that Netflix goes into, the town receives an increase in our business licenses. We expect some projections show that may go up to $400,000 within the next 10 years, if Netflix projections can hold.
Thank you. I think that helps a little bit.
Are they selling DVDs when they go into new countries?
Well, thank you, Mayor. Only the California subscriptions were subject to local sales tax. Yeah.
I have a question that a lot of it is based on my memory, and so it might not have a good foundation. But I'm looking at the recommended budget adjustments, both the revenue and the expenditures. It's page 12. That list of adjustments seems much more expansive or long than in years past. Is my memory faulty, or is it longer? And if it's longer, why are there so many items?
Mayor, my best answer to that is that we have been, with the help of our analysts, we've been budgeting, and I would say over the past 10 years, we have been more refined in our approach to the budget. So, because that has been part of our goal to streamline our service delivery and really deliver our services at the lowest possible cost. So maybe in prior years there was, for instance, if you had a department that needed to raise one of their expenditure items $5,000, they may have savings in another area. We, with the analysis we've done in our budget, and the budget office and also the departmental analysts have looked at each line item very closely. We don't have much give. So the only way we could fund these on this more extensive list is we would have to tell the department, all right, we've increased, for instance, we've increased the maintenance budget in Public Works, but 10,000, but now you need to cut another one 10,000, and we don't want to do that. We have sufficient revenues this year. As Gatos pointed out, we have still, after all these budget adjustments are approved, we still are $1 million ahead in revenues versus what we've recommended as expenditure increases. So we felt this was a year that we could bring these forward and not have to reduce other line items in the budget.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. I don't have any cards. Does anyone from the audience wish to address us on this agenda item? Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public testimony portion of this public hearing and look to the council for questions, discussions, motion. Ms. Sayak.
Okay. Thank you, Director Conway. You answered all my questions prior in your staff report, so didn't have any for tonight. So I'm prepared to make a motion that we receive the 2015-16 mid-year budget performance and status report, including the 2015-16 year-end projections. We consider authorizing the budget adjustments as recommended in the second quarter budget performance report, We approved the Hire Ahead Authority and received the town's five-year financial projection from 2016-17 to 2020-2021.
All right, we have a motion, and just for my clarification, the first portion, component of that was including the fiscal year 2015-16 year-end projections?
That is correct.
All right. Do we have a second? Mr. Leonardis?
I will second the motion.
We have a motion and second discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we are now on agenda item 10. The Community Grants Fiscal Year 2016-17 Funding Request Update. Do we have a staff report?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christina Gilmore, Assistant to the Town Manager. The item you have before you this evening is to receive a community grant fiscal year 2016-17 funding request update, and I would like to advise the council that a desk item was distributed on this item this afternoon. At the December 15, 2015 council meeting, the council directed staff to return at mid-year with a summary of the requested allocations for the 2016-17 community grant funds. As you'll recall, the town has historically allocated approximately $100,000 in community grants to both human services agencies as well as arts, cultural, and education organizations. So the item that we're bringing for you this evening is a summary of the grants that were received. The grant process opened on December 18th of 2015 and closed on January 21st of this year. Both the Community and Senior Services Commission and the Arts and Culture Commission, have met to review all of the grant applications, and what they're putting for you this evening is just a summary of the total funding that has been requested. As you'll see in the staff report, the arts grants allocation for 2015-16 was a total of $19,800. The recommended allocation for moving forward for 2016-17 would remain the same, at the same $19,800 level. For human services grants, the 2015-16 allocation was $90,000. The Arts and Human Services Commission has put forward two recommendations. The first recommendation would be to maintain that $90,000 funding allocation to carry over in 2016-17. The second recommendation would be to move forward to increase the allocation for 16-17 by an additional $10,000 to bring the total allocation up to $100,000. So these are the recommendations that the commissions have brought forward to you. This is just one step in the process. After tonight's evening in the council direction, each of the commissions will hold public hearings in which they'll ask each of the agencies to attend to speak on each of their programs, and then they will make their final funding recommendations to the council for council adoption for the June budget. So that concludes staff reports, and staff is available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions of staff. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Ms. Gilmore, so I see that you, with the alternate recommendation, the West Valley Community Services has been increased by $10,000. So I'm curious, why did they choose to increase that one to the requested amount, but didn't increase Cassie, for example, or some of the others? Why was that one special?
So if you recall, the Community and Senior Services Commission made a presentation to council last fall in which they identified senior services as one of the #1 priorities for the town of Los Gatos, in particular senior case management. West Valley Community Services has submitted an application to provide what they call care case management that would provide case management for seniors within the town of Los Gatos. They traditionally or I shouldn't say they traditionally, the last couple of years, their allocation has been half of what they've requested. And due to the fact that the commission has been notified by Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation that the request for senior case management has increased annually, the commission felt that if the council would agree to the alternative recommendation to fund West Valley Community Services at their fully requested amount of $20,000, that would help to offset some of the senior case management issues that the Recreation Center is currently addressing.
Thank you. Good answer.
Further questions? Ms. Sayak?
Thank you. Same type of question. Would that 10,000 be specific towards Los Gatos case management services? Because West Valley does serve a larger community. And so is there an opportunity to show that that 10,000 additional would be able to provide directly to our residents?
That's correct. So for all grants that the town allocates, we do require that agencies show that their programming goes towards Los Gatos residents. So we do ask them to provide that information upfront when they apply for grants, and as well as part of their quarterly reporting. So we do verify that they do serve Los Gatos residents, and we ask them to verify that quarterly for each budget cycle.
Ms. Sack?
And one additional question to that, when the commission came forward last time and discussed all the various needs, one of the things that they highlighted was the importance of an actual person on site to provide these. Is that something that West Valley provides? Are they actually on site to work through the various issues? Is that something that we can, so that's the first question, and if not, is that something that we can request through this grant process?
So I believe currently the amount of hours that West Valley Community Senior Services has to have someone on site at the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Center are very limited based on the funding allocation within the current year. We certainly can follow up with them for 2016-17 and ask them to provide some additional information about how often they may be able to provide those services physically at our location here in town, as opposed to making themselves available for people to go to one of their other facilities in the county. So we can follow up with them to get information on that.
And I see Mr. Leonardis, but let me follow up on Ms. Sayak's question. We get more information. This agenda item is preliminary to the budget review. Can we get that information when it comes back for budget approval?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Ms. Gilmore, on attachment 2, there's an entity called the Los Gatos Community Concert Association. I'm not familiar with this organization, but the request was only for $1,000, and for some reason the committee recommended $3,800. This is an anomaly when you compare them to each and every other entity on both tables. Either their request amount was granted as asked, or less than their request amount was granted as asked. So I'm just wondering, number one, who is this organization? And number two, why would we give them more than what they had asked for when there are entities such as art docents or others that have been in the community for a long time that could possibly use those additional funds?
Thank you for the question. So in the addendum that was distributed yesterday, February 29th, the first question in the addendum was asking for more information about Los Gatos Community Concerts. Los Gatos Community Concerts is an organization that has been providing concerts to Los Gatos community for the past 68 years. They have a long history here in the town. Part of their programming is they provide 4 concerts a year. They utilize Los Gatos High School Theater. A lot of their patrons are members of the Los Gatos community and are low-income seniors, so they are able to subscribe to their annual concert series at a subsidized cost, and so that is the service that they provide to the town. As far as the increase this year that's being recommended, so historically, this organization has applied for a $1,000 grant to run their organization, their operations, and they've received that for the last several years. Because the Art Commission didn't apply for funding this year based on prior council action to provide them with funds for their programming. There was money left over in their total allocation based on the 15-16 year allocation. And so in recognizing that this is a longstanding community program that provides a service to a population of people who may or may not have the opportunity to get out of the house every once a month or once a quarter, as well as this type of programming can be very expensive, they felt that they would increase their budget to $3,800 from $1,000 to allow them to increase their outreach and subsidies for that population.
Mr. Leonardis?
One follow-up. Thank you, Mayor. So the way I understand it is that there was a $2,800 surplus and that the Arts Commission said just give it to this group, even though they did not ask for it. But perhaps maybe it could have been split between all four of these entities equally.
Yes, and so the Art Commission did consider that as a second alternative to split this $2,800 amongst the other four organizations. They did reach out to Los Gatos Community Concert to find out if this additional funds would assist them in their program outreach, and they responded in the affirmative. So this is a preliminary recommendation that we're just bringing forward the bottom line of the total amounts requested for the arts grants to the council. However, pending council direction, the Arts Commission will have an opportunity to review their preliminary recommendations before they put forward final recommendations for council consideration and adoption with the budget.
Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Rennie?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So kind of following along on what you've touched on, when I look at this, the fact that the Arts Commission is not getting anything, I wonder about their work plan for next year. So it tells me that their Cats in the Trees program will be finished and the Forbes Mill Bridge painting installation will be done, and they don't really have anything on their work plan that they need money for. Is that the way I'm reading this?
No, that's incorrect. At the January 19th council meeting, the Arts Commission came forward with the report to the council with an update on their progress of their arts plan. At that time, they requested a $7,000 allocation from the council. $5,000 of that would go, I'm going to speak out of turn. I don't remember exactly how it was divided, but of the $7,000, that money would go towards finishing Phase 4 of the Forbes Mill Footbridge, as well as helping them to develop their arts plan. So that was an allocation that was approved by council at the January meeting. So when it came to the arts grants programming, there was no need for the Arts Commission to apply to compete for funds because the council did approve $7,000 to go towards to help them with their arts plan and the Forbes Mill Footbridge.
If I could
Mr. Rennie?
follow up. So then the $8,400 that was there for, I guess, this year, what did that go for? Or, are we calling something grants and then not calling it grants now?
So in the current 15-16 year budget that was allocated for the Arts Commission, a portion of that money was dedicated to the Forbes Mill Footbridge, which we are currently working with the vendor to get completed for the installation. Another portion was to go to the catwalk Phase 2. However, the Art Commission has put the Phase 2 of the catwalk on hold in order to address some of the issues with the first catwalk installation. And so that is something that the town is currently working with the artists to enter into an agreement to come and review and possibly move those cat sculptures. So they're still working through their current 15-16 year budget allocation, and they anticipate to expend the majority of those funds by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. No questions of staff. I have no cards. Does anyone wish to address us on this item? This is agenda item 10, community grants. Okay, please give us your name. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Judith Fishwick, 149 Bassano Lane. I'm speaking on behalf of the Art Business of Los Gatos. We are the docents that provide art appreciation and art workshops to the students in the Los Gatos Union School District, kindergarten through 5th, 7th and 8th. We've been doing so for over 40 years, all on volunteer time. We are a 501 nonprofit and depend on grants and donations to provide art education to over 3,000 students. This represents at least 1,600 hours of volunteer time per school year and 90 school visits per month to our students. We also produce a yearly art show to exhibit the students' work, usually held at Fisher School, and is a week in length. It is open to the community and is staffed by the art docents of Los Gatos. We also have a yearly guest artist program which we raise funds for, when a professional artist will present and discuss their art and its process and talk about their life as an artist. In the past, we've had artists presenting recyclable art, metalwork art, a children's book illustrator, and this year we have a Los Gatos artist who is an architect, a professional watercolor painter, and is now producing and teaching iPad art. We have an understanding with the school district to teach to the California and Los Gatos Union School District standards. We must supply docents, and the schools have to include us in their curriculum. Initial docent training is 10 weeks long, and we supply continuing education thereafter for all docents. I cannot emphasize enough the quality of education and excellent school ratings within our community, which we feel the art docents of Los Gatos have helped build over the past 40 years. I wish to remind our dedicated council members that although student enrollment has increased measurably over the past few years, our grant receipts from the Los Gatos Town Council have actually declined. In fact, they are lower today than in 2009. As an organisation, we do fundraise and we apply for appropriate grants, but first and foremost, our responsibility and time lies within the classroom. In closing, we need your support for the art docents to continue to keep our school district to its high standard and therefore strengthen our community. I thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question, and it looks like there are others also. Right now, the recommendation is 4,000. It's like the request was 4,000. Are you now requesting more than that amount?
Yes, I think we were being rather shy and polite. And we looked back over our numbers, and our students have increased. We're now, as counting last week, we've got 3,327 students, which is quite an increase.
So if you weren't shy and polite, what would the request be?
We would like 5,500 this year would help us.
Okay. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I was going to ask the question that Ms. Fishwick just answered about how many students are served. And I have one other question, which is, you said your funding is lower today than it was in 2009. Do you recall what you had received from the town in 2009?
As far back as 2003, we would get 4,500 in 2003. 2009, it was 4,380.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing no one, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else in the audience who wishes to address us? Seeing no one coming forward and no cards, I will close the public testimony portion of our public hearing and look to the council for questions, discussion, motion. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I do have another question for staff. My understanding is what they're asking us to give direction on is not the specific allocations, but the total dollar amounts. And then also there's a request for the 3% cost of living increase, and that's just in the total amount. So if we say this year, 100,000 is what we'd like to go to the community service grants, then if we have the 3% next year, it'd be 103%?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
May I have a motion, or I guess a question or discussion? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Ready to make a motion on this. After hearing testimony from the speaker and hearing what Ms. Gilmore said about the other organization and the way that the funding was allocated, I think that I would like to recommend in the staff report that we go with items 1, 2, and 3 on page 1, receive the community grants fiscal year funding request update. And I'd like to provide the direction to the Human Services grant budget allocation that it remain at $90,000. And on item 3, I would like to approve the amount of $19,800, but I would like to direct more money towards the art docents of Los Gatos. I think that should be at least $5,000. The speaker requested $5,500. I am doing this predicated on the condition that YSI goes from $0 to $5,000. It's also an important organization for youth. The Los Gatos Community Concert Association only asked for $1,000, and they're being awarded $3,800, which is a nice gesture. But and the museums of Los Gatos were being awarded $7,000, or as per their request, when last year they only had $5,000. So last year the art docents took a cut from $4,000 to $3,000. And looking at all these other funding requests, it seems more fair to give more money towards the art docents. So I'm going to recommend that go as $5,500 as a component of that $19,800. And the others, let the community, the Arts and Cultural Commission, when they do the review, decide how to divvy up the remaining overage.
We have a motion, and before I ask for a second, I want to make sure that I understand the motion. Looking at the recommendations from staff, you're doing A, which is receive the request. You're doing B, which is the Human Services grant allocation, but you're modifying C as to the Arts and Culture Commission, and this is where I need the clarification. You're suggesting an increase to the arts docents to $5,500?
That is correct, but keeping the total amount at the $19,800 recommendation.
And so $1,500, the organization would have to look at to see where the $1,500 is reduced. Is that correct?
Yes, and I mean, I'm hesitant to make a specific recommendation, but I would look at things such as either the YSI, the NUMU, or the Community Concert Association, which again only applied for $1,000 but was awarded $3,800. So any of those or all three perhaps can contribute towards the increase to the art docents.
The $1,500. Okay, very good. We have a motion. Do we have a second? All right, well, Mr. Leonardis, I will second so that we can get this moving one way or the other. Discussion. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I did not second this because I don't think the motion is appropriate. My understanding is the grants aren't even in yet, and we're already trying to allocate funds. My understanding of this was a sort of a conceptual of how they might go, and what we're really trying to do is decide whether we're increasing community service grants from $90,000 to $100,000 or some other number, and the same thing with the arts and culture type and grants, arts, culture, education grants. So I think I will not support the motion as is.
Discussion. All right, I seconded the, I don't disagree with Mr. Rennie. However, I seconded the motion because I see that we are being asked to provide direction, and I am interpreting the motion that I seconded as providing direction but not a mandate. Discussion. We'll start with Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Rennie. That's why I didn't second the motion, and I won't support it. If we are just considering a broad brush of how much money do we want to ultimately allow for grants, both for human services and for arts and culture, deciding now without complete information and presentation from each of the, I'm sure, all very fine organizations, It seems to me to be very premature to be allocating dollars, just like it was with the tax measure when we considered it in February. So I look forward to hearing the complete information from those organizations seeking grant funds in June.
Further discussion? Hearing no one, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, motion fails 2-3. I'm looking for another motion. Ms. Sayak.
Okay, I did not support the prior motion for the reasons stated, so let's try a different one. I move to receive the community grants funding request update. The direction that I'm proposing in this motion is with the Human Services grant to increase to the $100,000 with the opportunity to hear from West Valley what additional resources we can get with the $10,000, specifically if there's an opportunity for case management on site in Los Gatos. With regard to the arts, cultural, and educational grant budget allocation, I'm a big fan of the art docents, and while I do think they deserve an increase, I think in fairness, I'd like to keep the opportunity and for all 4 of the grantees to present to the commission their case for the additional $2,800 and let the commission make their judgment on how to best leverage those resources. Again, I think it's a fairness issue, and that as these proposals come forward, I look to hear how all the proposals stack up with the commission recommendations.
We have a motion. We have a second. Mr. Rennie?
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I guess I was confused by the last column in the table that says Evaluation Committee recommendation. I do agree that they will be coming forward and they will be making presentations. It's just that sometimes these tables and these meetings end up transposing into law later, and it becomes forgotten. The prior discussion on how we've arrived at these figures, if we're voting on total numbers, well, then we should have a blank table that should say we have $90,000 or $100,000. We should have $9,800 for the Arts and Cultural Commission recommendations. But it's clear to me that it's already sort of been evaluated, and this is kind of, the wheels are in motion. So I question whether those committees will be able to, I don't know, non-biasedly hear the evaluations. And as Ms. Gilmore's testimony stated, they thought it was a good idea to add $2,800 to this other committee just because they had it extra. So it's kind of like they already made up their minds. So we can either go at this as the minds are already made up and we'll vote the amounts in, or we can vote in blind amounts and then see these numbers again later, which will probably become law. I don't know. But I'm unclear as to how I'm going to vote on this motion.
Further discussion? I'm going to support the motion because I am comfortable that staff will communicate to the commission that this was not, the blanks were not filled in on the last column. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No. Passes
4-1, Mr. Leonardis voting no. Next agenda item 11, public hearing, adopt a resolution establishing an underground utility district along Los Gatos Boulevard from South Lark to Churco. Staff presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Lisa Peterson, Town Engineer. Staff is recommending that Council adopt a resolution establishing a utility undergrounding district on Los Gatos Boulevard from Lark to Churco Drive. The Town Council had previously approved the boundaries of the district at the January 19th, 2016 Town Council meeting, and you can see that's up on the screen. The town currently has approximately $3.9 million in Rural 28 credits that we can put towards an undergrounding district. PG&E is estimating that undergrounding on Los Gatos Boulevard is going to cost from anywhere from $2.1 to about $3 million in our Rural 28 credits.
PG&E does require the town to adopt a resolution establishing the district in order for us to get those credits. And if council does adopt the resolution and establish the district, PG&E estimates that they would start the design probably in about a year and a half. It would take them about 2 years to complete the design. Once the design is completed, they anticipate scheduling the construction, and completing the construction will take about 3 years. And that's the end of my report. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions of staff, Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Quick question. So Rule 21, what does that mean? These funds, can we use them for something else, building green bike lanes or something like that?
No, so we can only use this for undergrounding and under specific requirements. So we can use it for undergrounding utility lines, and it needs to be something that is has high traffic or pedestrian volumes, is going through some sort of civic area, or maybe has an unusual concentration of wires in the area.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Ms. Sayak.
Because it's a utility, how much construction management oversight does the town have? I'm concerned on how much, the problems that are associated often with construction on a busy road. And so I'd like to understand a little bit more about the process, how much control we can have, and how we can mitigate some of the anticipated problems. Yes, so having worked with PG&E on a couple undergrounding districts, PG&E sets a project manager up for the district. They work very closely with the town, so they would be working closely with the Public Works Department. We would also have a inspector that would be associated with the project, helping to enforce any kind of requirements that we have regarding traffic or other issues.
Ms. Sayak.
So things such as when construction hours occur, things, an example like that, they would abide by our town construction rules versus whatever their utility rules happen to be. Yes, thank you, that's correct. Okay.
Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Ms. Peterson, I noticed that this goes from Lark to Churco. Is there any reason why it wouldn't go to Blossom Hill Road or further?
So we had actually at one point looked at extending it further south. And further south from Churco, there are currently transmission lines, and transmission lines are not eligible for the Rural 20A credits. So we could not underground with Rural 20A.
So this is the most we can get out of what we're trying to do?
That's correct along this section.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. I don't have any cards. I'm going to have a card. If anybody wants to speak to us on this item, please submit a card. Ms. Dorner.
Hello, Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove. I just have a general overall question about the timing, and as it relates to the timing of the construction at North 40, seeing the intersection of Lark and Los Gatos Boulevard already being potentially significantly impacted by what's going to be going on there. Timeline-wise, it seems like they're going to be coinciding, and I'm wondering how that can be manageable.
Thank you. Anybody else want to address us on this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public testimony portion of the public hearing and look for questions of staff, discussion, motion. I do have a question of staff because I didn't burrow down on this enough to figure it out myself, but the issue of North 40 and this construction, I thought of that too. Answer.
Yes, thank you for the question. PG&E, this is an estimate, of course, of when they think the work would start, but we're probably looking at 7 years out. And ultimately, we can work with PG&E to help coordinate how that would match up with the North 40 construction.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? May I have discussion or motion? Ms. Jensen.
Comments and a motion. Well, I'll make a motion, then I'll make some comments. My motion would be that we adopt the resolution, which is attachment A to our staff report, establishing an underground utility district along Los Gatos Boulevard from south of Lark Avenue to Turco Drive, With respect to the Rule 20, it's just a structure, a government structure that PG&E puts in place so that communities collect actually undergrounding fees. Los Gatos has been collecting from projects, building projects, developers, whoever it might be, fees for undergrounding for several years. We've never used them. So we've amassed this amount of money that we've never used. And you can use it for specific purposes. You can use it, as Ms. Peterson said, for specific high-traffic areas that have a lot of poles. So when Los Gatos was identifying where this could possibly be, there are very strict requirements that PG&E will do. This was the area that was identified as the one that would qualify. And then there's a number of steps that the town has to do, among them adopting a resolution. Lots of communities want to do this and use their funds, but essentially Los Gatos has to take the steps to get in line. So the idea that it would be next week is ludicrous, quite frankly. It's just that the town's you've got to put all your ducks in a row in order for PG&E to get there and do it. You just get in line. So by the time that this ever happens, who knows whether it will happen, but it's not imminent. But we do need to take the steps to ensure that we can use those funds that we've been collecting all those years, hence my motion.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Rennie?
I'll second the motion.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 12, implement a 6-month pilot preferential parking program in the Alpine neighborhood. Yeah, I know what Almond is, like Almond Grove. In the Alpine neighborhood, restricting parking to 90 minutes without a permit, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday. I do have some cards of people who want to testify on this. If anybody else does, please submit a card to staff. And do we have a report?
Yes, we do. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm J.R. Langer, the Support Services Lieutenant with the Police Department. It's good to be here tonight and have the opportunity to present a staff report in regards to a petition for preferential parking in the Alpine Avenue neighborhood. The police and the Parks and Public Works Departments have both contributed to the development of this report. In August of 2015, the Police Department received a petition requesting a preferential parking program in the Alpine Avenue neighborhood. According to the parking plan process, petitions submitted for preferential parking need to include signatures from at least 50% of the affected residential households, state what specific problems exist, at what time the problems occur, what days of the week the problems are most significant, and suggested potential modifications. The Alpine petition met these criteria and was agendized for review by the Transportation and Parking Commission. In November of 2015, the Transportation and Parking Commission met and discussed the Alpine Avenue petition, making a recommendation for implementation of a 6-month pilot preferential parking program. The Police and Parks and Public Works Departments continued to gather data specific to the Alpine Avenue petition, and as part of the process, scheduled an informational neighborhood meeting to discuss the data gathered and to establish if 67% of the affected residential households were able to agree on specific parking modifications. The Alpine neighborhood met this criteria and agreed upon modifications that were consistent with other preferential parking restrictions currently in place. A letter documenting the neighborhood meeting was distributed to the 29 households within the dedicated or described affected area. In addition to traditional notification, in an effort to reach a broader audience, staff also sent out a message to the community concerning their review of the petition by social media. I have 3 pictures that I'd like to share with the council that display the various degrees of parking impacts in Alpine Avenue. This first picture illustrates the condition when parking is impacted on Alpine Avenue. And you can see the narrowness of the roadway there, with vehicles parked on both sides of the road. This second picture illustrates conditions when parking is unimpacted. And you can see the difference between the narrowness and the availability for vehicles to travel both sides, up and down. And this final picture is just an overview depicting Alpine Avenue. This concludes my report, and I'm available for questions.
Do we have questions? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Langer, with the proposal, they're still allowed to park on both sides of the street, is that correct? Even, obviously, if, there's the restriction from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., but residents could still park on both sides of the street.
They could.
Okay, because as someone who travels the street every day, what's difficult is when there are cars parked on both sides of the street, you see how narrow it is down the middle. Only one car can pass and people have to back up and there's a lot of issues. So I guess, was there any thought given to eliminating parking completely on one side of the street all the way up as opposed to this particular plan?
Thank you for the question. And it's something that we did consider. When we decided to make our recommendation, we were trying to take into thought both the aspects for the community and how they need to be able to use the street to park, and also for the safety considerations present. And when we decided to make our recommendation, we took into consideration that this is a 6-month pilot program, and at the end of the 6 months, if we felt that parking was still impacted enough to reducing the roadway to a narrowness that was unsafe, that we would recommend at that time if we needed a red curb or not.
Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. And one other follow-up question, since you mentioned the red curb at the bottom of Alpine. I don't know whether it's the first 500 feet or whatever is red on both sides. Is there any history with the town and our parking problems regarding why that curb was painted red on both sides?
To my recollection, a number of years ago, it was specifically because of speed and the narrowness of the roadway and people that would park on either side of the street, and the vehicles that were navigating that turn or curve area would sometimes go past the center of the roadway. And so those red curbs were installed for the safety of vehicles traveling up and down during that area.
Thank you.
Ms. Sayak.
Thank you. I appreciate the thoroughness of the report. One question I did have is with all pilot projects. First, I'm a big fan of pilot projects, but if you could just kind of walk me through what are the metrics you're looking for during the 6 months? Are you looking for less police complaints, less maybe accidents reported? If you could just tell me what your measure of success at the end of 6 months, so that should you make it a permanent move?
Good question. What we would be looking for is, one, is that the parking compaction or impact on Alpine Avenue, creates less density there and does allow for safer traffic and for vehicles traveling the roadway the opportunity to pull to the side to let vehicles traveling the other way to go past them. We would also look into the neighborhood's satisfaction of whether the parking project is working or not, if it works for their needs and desires as well. Having a permit parking project or program in your neighborhood is something new to the Alpine neighborhood, and we want to make sure that they are happy with the way that it works out and understand fully the way that it is going to work. And also, yes, we would definitely look at the number of accidents and the amount of speeders that are being reported to us by the residents, as well as the amount of vehicle traffic just traveling the roadway as it is, and turnaround traffic, people dropping people off for school, other things like that.
Yes, please.
And I understand Alpine is one street, and the tension that I hear in this particular application is the tension between the high school parking as well as the residents' concerns for the safety on their street. What I'd like to know also from you is there an opportunity to use the data from the 6 months to tie into this larger traffic study that we're doing around the schools? Because what I'm concerned about is we eliminate that parking, and there are valid reasons for doing so, but then does that start to generate problems on other streets? And is there a mechanism so that we can understand if the problem is spreading and how we can solve this overall problem that we all have to grapple with? And I'm confident there is, but if you could just give me a reassurance, you're looking at a larger problem beyond what Alpine is currently presented today.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, you're exactly correct. And we do anticipate that there might be some push out from the limited parking on Alpine Avenue. We are very interested in working in collaboration with Parks and Public Works and the traffic survey that will be conducted. And we are currently also working with the high school with safe routes to school and the other communities in the neighborhood to try and figure out the best methods to approach this or to look at this.
Thank you. Other questions? See none? If you wish to address us on this item, please submit a card. I do have a few cards. First one, Douglas Rice. And Mr. Rice, you'll have 3 minutes.
Members of the council, good evening. My name is Douglas Rice, and my family and I have resided on Alpine Avenue for over 20 years. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the request for permit parking on our street. My neighbors and I have increasingly been impacted by overflow parking from Los Gatos High School for years now. During school days, our street becomes a single-lane thoroughfare and frequently becomes impassable, particularly to larger vehicles. It's become a concern to us whether public safety vehicles can even maneuver up the street and what impact that inability to pass will have on response time in an emergency. We've reached out to school administrators seeking their assistance in addressing this issue, but the school has failed to take any substantive actions to address the problem. School administrators continue to use the mantra of changing student behavior, believing it is a solution to the parking problem. At the same time, they admit in public meetings that they have not been a good neighbor and are purely in a reactive rather than proactive mode where future planning is concerned. With their focus solely on classrooms to support the projected student population growth, they seem to forget the impacts that will occur outside of the campus. More importantly, they don't see them as their problem. To be clear, none of us are against the school or its students, but the daily disruption we endure, including litter, personal property damage, and public safety concerns, clearly weigh on the side of action. My family and I support the staff's recommendations for implementing the permit parking area without a one-sided parking restriction and look forward to your action this evening.
Mr. Rice, I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for your input. You mentioned a lack of school substantive measures. What, if any, ideas would you have with regard to a school substantive measure?
Okay, the school came to us. First of all, they said they were going to have a meeting with us, public meeting. They have failed to do so. The vice principal informed us that they were making specific recommendations to students, including utilizing parking at Balzer Field. I asked the students, I engage the students every morning in front of my house. Those students have never heard of those recommendations. I asked administration to please publish, for lack of a better term, an accident of the week. Show a picture of what's been damaged on Alpine. They have thus far refused to do so. We've made numerous recommendations. We've sat down with them. We've said, these are the issues. These are the problems. It grows. Their response is, it's a public street. We don't teach driver's ed anymore. We don't teach students how to park. These students are in a public place. They're not our problem.
Thank you. Next card, Pamela Nerney, and I may have mispronounced your...
Hi, good evening. I'm Pamela Nerney. I live at 47 Alpine. I I would just like to point out that there's, by my count, 25 Alpine residents here tonight, if people would raise their hands. Just as a visual for all of you, Lieutenant Langer told us that it wasn't, we were welcome, but it was not required. But we have shown close to over, most of the time, 90% attendance at all of the processes and meetings along the way. So there is a deterioration of quality of life where we live. It's our homes. So the parking, it's left at parking in the very thorough report that Lieutenant Langer just presented, but I like to call it the parking lot environment. Just today, a dad was dropping off his son's dinner at 5:30, because they're there often very late, and knew where he'd be parking, and was blocking the middle of the street when somebody was trying to come down. So it is things like that that happen every day that without living there, it's very difficult to put into a report. But in the respect to your time, I'm not going to go through all the rest of it. You have the report. I assume you have the emails and the other things. And I would just like to commend both Lieutenant Langer, Kalipo, and Jackie Rose, who isn't here, and working with them over the last lots and lots of months. But we're here if there's any questions or any dissent. Okay, thank you.
Before you leave, just you may have questions, but first of all, I appreciate your showing support by showing hands. I always like that, as opposed to 52 people talking for 3 minutes and saying the same thing.
No, I think that's a better message anyway.
All right, so questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
We do have one more card, Bruce Mitchell.
Bruce Mitchell, 98 Alpine Avenue, and just affirm that the neighborhood is uniformly in favor of getting this problem resolved. The motion that's been made, or the report that's been made, it's a pretty accurate representation of what the neighborhood wants, and I'll keep it to a lot less than 3 minutes.
And we appreciate that too. Questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. I have no other cards. I have no other cards except the one that's coming. All right, I'm going to ask you, please give your speaker cards to staff. Is this Donald Cariani?
Correct. Thank you, everyone. My name's Don Cariani. I live on the corner of Alpine and Foster, where the last house on the left, Alpine's End. I just want to ask that if you do adopt the study that's been presented to you and ask for a 6-month study, that puts us in the summer. Today is March 1. If we have the school year through May, June, July, and August, if that's what you're planning, it's a lost cause. So if it's not enacted permanently tonight without the 6-month study, the 6-month study which would have to demand that it goes into the new academic year. Otherwise, you might as well forget the study.
Thank you. Questions? I actually think that's a good issue. And rather than wait until all the speakers have spoken, may we have staff just address their input on this, going into summer or not?
It's a good point by Ms. Cariani, and we would definitely take that into consideration to get the full effect of the pilot program. I imagine it also depends on the availability of installing the signs. And so that would also determine the time period of the program. But the time period that we would count would only be while school is in session.
Thank you. We have a question, sort of out of order, but I started the thing. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So, Mr. Langer, request has been made that it's a 6-month period during the school year. could we modify it to be a 9-month period? So it could cover the last 3 months of this school year, then the summer is quiet, then it goes to the next 3 months of next school year, or a 12-month period would be one question. The other question is a point that you brought up, the signs. How quickly would they be installed? When would the 6 months or 9 months or 1 year actually begin?
I would have to defer to Director Morley for the availability of the signs. But as far as to the time period and duration of the pilot program, we are at council's direction. And if you direct the program to be a 9-month program, that is something that we will do.
Thank you.
Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. The signs are something that we'll be making in-house and can get installed fairly readily, probably 30, 40 days, something like that.
All right, thank you.
All right, can we go on with the public hearing? Yes. Next speaker, Lisa Roberts.
You have my card. I'm Lisa Roberts. I am a resident at 78 Alpine Avenue. I only have 3 points to make. One is I want to respond to the comment about the possibility of a red line on one side of the road. That's not feasible, not on Alpine. The road is very long. There is no turnarounds. There are people, residents on both sides who are going to be using the road, portions of it, to park, and only one side could use the street to park if there's a red line without turning around. A second, I'm not going to talk about safety, I'm going to talk about community. And as I understand it, the reason for permit parking programs is to make sure that one segment of the community is not bearing the full burden of a community asset. And certainly the high school is a community asset, just like the downtown is a community asset. But just as there are protections for the people around downtown to make sure that there's not excess parking on their streets, there should also be protections for people who live near the high school, as there are in several neighborhoods already, to make sure that they're not shouldering an excess burden. The third point I would like to make is that we're not asking for a benefit. This isn't a benefit to us to have permit parking. I don't want permit parking, and I don't think anybody really wants to have permit parking in their neighborhood. It's a protection. And it's a protection so that indeed we no longer have what we've, just this year, for the first time really, we have a parking lot rather than a road. So, and with that, I want to also say that the idea, if the cars parked on the road are just what is there without the high school residents, there's plenty of room for negotiating along the road. It's worked for years and years. It's really only this year, and I don't know what it is exactly that happened at the high school, they're constructing or whatever, it's only this year, this school year, that our street has transformed itself into being a parking lot rather than a thoroughfare. Thank you.
Ms. Roberts, I have a question. Are you in support of staff's recommendation?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like Dirk Franklin.
Good evening, everybody. So my wife and I live at 79 Alpine Avenue. We've been there since 1997, and I'd like to echo some of the statements that have been made here. It's really the last year or so that our streets become a parking lot, and it's very clear to me, and hopefully the people in this room, it's the negligence of the high school to deal with on-campus parking. Clearly in their annual plan, they highlighted their, I read it was like 300 pages, but it was really talking about, here's what we want to do with Measure E funds. They highlighted 5 things. Number 5 was inadequate parking and traffic safety. And through the rest of the document, they ignored it. So I think it's very critical that the town step up and work with the high school. We will continue to engage the high school to fix this problem. But they are bad citizens. They are being negligent. And it's impacting the quality of life for my family. I have 2 young boys that ride their bikes down the street in the morning. It's not okay. So, as you can see by the show of hands tonight, we have a clear mandate that we want this special parking. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The last card I have is John, and it could be John Thompson or John M. Thompson. It was Thompson? Well, it's not Thompson tonight.
I'm John Thompson. It's my 33rd year on Alpine Avenue, and I support the measure. You saw a tremendous show of hands when you asked for people that are concerned about the issue who have come out. We've come out to all of the meetings that have been held to discuss this, and I would just like to thank Pamela Nerney for all of her hours of work in bringing us together and keeping us informed.
Thank you. All right, I have no other cards. I am now going to close the public testimony portion of this hearing and look once again to the council for questions, discussion, motion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I would like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the staff recommendation on this. I did not hear any opposition to this. Heard many comments about, safety, people's, how can I say it, being able to park in front of their homes, their property rights, their neighborhood, other issues in the neighborhood. And I think it's important that we maintain the quality of life for our residents. Looking at the situation with the high school, it's a difficult one. It is kind of unfortunate for the kids who are trying to find places to park. And by implementing programs like this, I think there is going to be the possibility that cars will spill into other areas. So I hope that our town could engage in the process with the high school and try to resolve this issue once and for all. I travel down that street every morning and taking my daughter to school, and I know it's very difficult to navigate. It's like flying down into the Death Star to blow up down that little thing. I mean, basically, as Mr. Rice stated, if a emergency vehicle had to pass that, it would be difficult. It is exasperated by things such as homes under construction. Up at the Foster and Alpine, there's a home there. There's one on the middle of Alpine under construction. Trash bins the size of phone booths being rolled out in the road. Those things don't help. So I look forward to this pilot program. I would like to add to the recommendation that the 6 months occur during the school year, not during the summer, and that the signs go in as soon as possible so we can get this started. And I empathize with the high school kids and their parking, and I don't think anybody's against the high school or the kids. It's a fantastic school. I think we should give them all motorcycles and teach them motorcycles and scooters, Vespas. I feel for the kids with their instruments and their 2 backpacks and all their computers and equipment they have now. And I remember the stories when we had to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow and all those kinds of things. And these poor kids today, they have a lot to carry. But I'm hoping as a community and as Mr. Langer alluded to with the traffic studies we're doing in and around the schools, that we can resolve some of these parking problems for the long term and not be it that the kids park at Lee High School to walk to Los Gatos High School someday. That is my motion.
Thank you. We have a motion as recommended by staff with the exception that the 6 months shall be during the school year and that signs be installed as soon as possible. Do we have a second? I see your hand. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. I'll second the motion. To use Ms. Dorner's phrase, as a proud resident of Bella Vista Avenue, I feel your pain. My street is not a parking lot, it is a driveway, a speed ramp to the parking lot. So I am sensitive to what the vice mayor talked about as being cure one problem and have the problem expand to other areas. Not that I'm saying, well, I don't want this to go to my neighborhood. It's there. But my concern is that as I listen to you, I have deja vu about the Hillbrook problem, and so I'm going to take this opportunity to ask the high school to do what Hillbrook did because the town had control over it and could impose conditions on its use. So over many, many years, with the same kind of concerns from the Marchmont area, Hillbrook finally, at the encouragement, very strong encouragement of the neighborhood and the council and the planning commission, undertook a traffic demand management plan. So I'm going to take this opportunity, if anybody from the high school is listening, please step up and be proactive, as the people in the audience have indicated, and work to solve your problem the way that Hillbrook worked to solve its problem, because there is a way to do it. We don't have the angry people from Marchmont anymore, hopefully, because we've imposed conditions, and they've come to a meeting of the minds and have been able to creatively work through processes to figure out how to manage that issue. The high school clearly has an issue, and I hope that the high school will come to the table with the neighbors and with the town and offer solutions, not excuses. The high school is an asset. It's great. I'm a total advocate of public schools. But please, I hope that you recognize your role in the community, and please make it a better community by coming forward with solutions for us.
I'm getting soft on people. All right, so that's 2 clappings, no more. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I will support this motion because I feel the people's pain on Alpine. I think they're probably running out of hair to pull out. But it does feel to me like a Band-Aid, and we're not addressing the main problem. I think we're just going to push cars to other streets, and we'll be back putting this restriction on other streets. Hillbrook has done a wonderful job. I think even LGUSD has done a lot to try to reduce not parking but traffic by encouraging safe routes to school. They're really making an effort. When I compare to the high school seems to just be giving lip service. If we put parking restrictions on everything for 2 miles around the high school, then maybe they'll be forced to do something about it. Hopefully we don't have to go to that point. I recall my years in high school, you could only drive to school if you were a senior, and they would watch to see if you parked on streets nearby and come after you. I'm not sure why sophomores have to be driving to school. I could see if somebody's coming from the mountains and maybe we write them an exception and we give them a parking place, but I think this is overdone what's allowed, and I don't think the high school is even trying to manage it. So I echo the please high school, work with us. I know our staff has been trying to work with them. We've got traffic studies coming. I think all the council members are thinking about how do we solve this problem, but we need some more help from the other side. Thank you.
Further discussion. The issue, as Ms. Jensen said, we've had an issue with the high school and its traffic for a long time, and it's only getting worse. And we can surmise as to why it's getting worse. It's construction. It's eliminating parking spaces. At this point, I'm going to give the high school the benefit of, what they have said. First of all, they are cooperating with the traffic study, which, as I said earlier, is just beginning now, and it's traffic study with regard to parking and traffic around the schools. So that is one thing that's going forward, and it's just starting. And the other thing is that the high school has just started again, in fact, just started again like last week, meeting with the manager and staff and the mayor with regard to outstanding issues. And of course, this was one of the outstanding issues. So I am hopeful. I'm going to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that we are going to turn a corner and we are going to get better as far as the high school and its relationship with the town as a whole. I know that they have are only giving parking passes to seniors this year. So maybe that's a step in the right direction. But we're going to have to wait and see if they become a Hillbrook, which would be really nice. But in the meantime, this motion and its proposal is our Band-Aid, and we'll see how we do. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you all. Meeting's adjourned.